All right. So the nervous system. The nervous system. Now, basically, the nervous system is a communicating system, or more like a communicating network. Okay. So one of the key points that you should reflect on when you hear of the nervous system is that it's more of a communicating system. Now, we have other communicating systems like the endocrine system. When we say a communicating system, what it means is that the activities of that system helps your body one way or the other to communicate some kind of information. Is that okay? That is what we mean by a communicating system. Okay, good. So the nervous system is the body's fast acting communicating network, and is responsible for detecting stimuli, processing information, and coordinating responses through electrical and chemical signals. Is that okay? So the nervous system uses electrical and chemical signals, okay, to help your body to detect stimuli, process information, and then coordinate responses. Okay, again, the nervous system is divided into two main parts. We have the central nervous system, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. Okay, and these two systems work together to control body functions and also connect your brain and spinal cord to the rest of your body. Okay, so basically, when you hear of nervous system, it's more of a communicating system. Okay, good. And this system is responsible for detecting stimuli, processing information, and coordinating responses through electrical and then chemical signals. So that means that the nervous system communicates using electrical signals and chemical signals. Is that okay? We have other systems like the endocrine system. It uses chemical signals. Okay, but the nervous system communicates using both electrical signals and then chemical signals. And I mentioned that the nervous system is basically divided into two main parts. So we have the central nervous system, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. So the CNS and then the PNS. So the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. Okay, and these two systems work together to control body functions, connect the brain and spinal cord to the rest of the body. Okay, now let's do a bit of anatomy regarding the nervous system. Now, the nervous system weighs about 2% of your total body weight. Okay, so when you take your total body weight as an average adult, then your nervous system weighs about 2% of your total body weight. Again, the nervous system receives about 20% of the body's blood supply at rest. So, you know, the heart, for example, supplies blood to all parts of your body. Now, if you take the whole blood that is being distributed out, okay, to be supplied to other organs like the heart, the lungs, the liver, okay, the nervous system alone receives about 20% of your body's total blood supply, especially when you are at rest. And that tells you how important the nervous system is. Because you see, if you are looking at all other systems, we have several systems. If you are looking at all the other systems, and then the nervous system alone is receiving 20% of the body's total blood supply, it tells you how significant the activities within the nervous system is to your body. Okay, that is significant enough, because for your whole body's total blood rating 100%, and then your nervous system alone receiving 20% of blood supply, that tells you the relevance of the nervous system. Is that okay? Remember, I told you the nervous system is divided into two main parts. We have the central nervous system, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. Now, in terms of the anatomical location, the central nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord, is housed within the skull and the vertebral column. This is what we are talking about. We are looking at anatomy, the nervous system, and we are saying it's divided into two. We have the central nervous system. If we say central nervous system, we are looking at the brain and then the spinal cord. We are looking at this. This is what we call the central nervous. This one plus this, the spinal cord. If you put them together, we call it central nervous system, CNS. So this is the brain, okay, and this is the spinal cord. If we put them together, so if you put the brain and the spinal cord together, that's what we call the central nervous system. And then we have the peripheral nervous system. All we are saying is that in terms of the anatomical location, the central nervous system, which is the brain, is housed within the skull and vertebral column. So you see, if you go, let's go back to this diagram. This one is within, the spinal cord is within the vertebral column, which is part of the skeletal system. And then the brain is inside the skull. So what we are saying is that in terms of their anatomical location, the central nervous system, the brain is housed within the skull, and then the spinal cord is housed within the vertebral column. That's all that we are saying. So the spinal cord is housed within the vertebral column. The brain is housed within the skull. Is that okay? Yes, that's what we are talking about. Now, the peripheral nervous system, the nerves and the ganglia extend throughout the body, connecting the nervous system to lymph and organs. So you see, this is what we are talking about. You see this one, the peripheral nervous system is extending to connect the various parts of the body to the CNS. So that is what we are trying to say. So we are saying, so you see this, these are the peripheral nervous system, the nerves, these ones here coming. Okay, so we are saying that the peripheral nervous system extends to the various parts of the body, connecting the various parts of the body to the brain and the spinal cord, which we call the CNS. So the peripheral nervous system extends to the various parts of your body and connects the central nervous system, okay, which includes the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so this peripheral nervous system is extending to connect the various parts of the body to the brain and then the spinal cord. That is what we are trying to see. Is that okay? Good. Now let's continue. Good. Now to the functions of the nervous system. Now the functions, I categorize the functions into 5 functions. So we have the sensory input, we have integration, we have motor input, we have hemostasis, regulation, and we have mental activities. Okay, so the functions of the nervous system, we have sensory input. So what that means is that the nervous system helps to detect changes in either internal and external environment throughout your sensory receptors. So for example, if someone touches your body, if your hand touches a hot object, your nervous system can help you to detect. It's a form of input. Is that okay? It's a signal in the form of an input. So your nervous system plays this role, sensory inputs, by way of helping to detect changes in your internal environment. If you enter a room that is very hot, how are you able to determine that the room is hot? It's your nervous system. Okay, so the nervous system has that ability to detect changes in the internal environment and also changes in your external environment through sensory receptors. Okay, so your nervous system, we have special sensory receptors. We have sensory receptors in your skin so that if you happen to touch a hot object, those sensory receptors can detect that this gentleman or this lady have touched the hot object. The necessary actions will be taken. Now, we have what we call integration. Now, this function is about processing and interpreting sensory information. So, for example, the point is that you see, if your body touches a hot object, now it's the nerves that detect that stimuli or that input. But there should be a mechanism to interpret that, okay, this is a hot object. Because you see, imagine the same part of your hand that can detect hot objects. The same part of your body can detect cold objects. Okay, so, but it's up to the brain or the nervous system to integrate or sort of interpret, process that information, process the stimuli, so that they are able to conclude that, oh, okay, this one is a hot object, so this is what your body should do. Then the necessary actions are taken or the appropriate response is delivered to that part of the body. Is that okay? Good. Then we have what we call the motor output. The motor output. Is that okay? Good. Now the nervous system, for example, you can ask yourself, okay, how you see sometimes you have voluntary control, sometimes you want to lift your hand. But you know that the actual signal to help you lift your hands is coming from the nervous system. It's coming from the brain and the spinal cord. And those are motor activities. Okay, so when we say a motor output, it's more like it signals from the brain and spinal cord to muscles. Okay, for example, if you want to move your leg, you think about it before you move your leg. Is that okay? Yes, so the signal, the output for you to move your leg, the signal is coming from the brain and the spinal cord. Is that okay? Yes, before that kind of activity happens. So the nervous system plays a role in all these activities. Okay, the nervous system plays a role in all these activities. Okay, then we have homeostasis regulation. You know, the nervous system plays a role in maintaining internal balance by controlling the body systems. Okay, for example, if it comes to activities like physiological activities like regulating your heart rate, respiration, digestion, the nervous system plays a role. Is that okay? Homeostasis regulations. Okay, good. Again, the nervous system plays a role in your mental activities. Okay, like how your thinking pattern, your memory, when you are learning, whether you learn, you remember, all that is influenced or depends on your nervous system activities. How well you learn or how well someone learns. Okay, your emotions, how you take decisions, all that depends on the activities of the nervous system. Okay, so the functions of the nervous system, they play sensory roles. Integration, which is about processing and interpreting information. Motor outputs, which is about the brain sending signals for you to initiate movement in a particular part of your body. Is that okay? Good. Then we have hemostasis regulation. Your nervous system plays a role in maintaining internal balance. Okay, then we have the mental activities. That is about how you think, your memory capacity, how well you are able to learn, concentrate, emotions, your decision making ability. All that depends on activities in your nervous system. Is that okay? So basically, that is the functions of the nervous system. Now, let's look at some key characteristics of the nervous system. Now, you remember I mentioned earlier on that one of the key responsibilities of the nervous system is to help your body communicate. So I mentioned that it's a communicating system. Okay, it's a communicating system. Okay, now, but there is something unique about communication in the nervous system. If you take communication in endocrine system too, is a communicating system. But you know, communication in endocrine system is very slow. But when it comes to nervous system, communication is very fast. Nerve impulses travels at speed up to 120 meters per second. And that's a serious deal. Yes, if you understand what that means, it's a serious deal. Okay, nerve impulses travel up to 120 meters per second. It's not a joke at all. That speed is not a child's play. And that tells you how relevant the nervous system is. Is that okay? And that allows the body to react almost, because you see, sometimes you can touch a hot object. Now, imagine your nervous system was very slow. It will take, let's say, 1 day before your body feels that you've touched a hot object. You can imagine the damage that will be caused to your body. And if that was the case, we would have been walking around with a lot of injuries. Because imagine you step on a nail, and then it takes about an hour before your body senses that you stepped on a nail. Can you imagine that? Yes, it would have caused a lot of damages to our body. Okay, but then a key character of the nervous system is that it's a rapid communicating system. And nerve impulses travel at a speed up to 120 meters per second. And that allows the body to react almost instantly, especially to changes or danger. Now, this system is a highly organized system. Okay, so it's a highly organized. Remember, even in terms of the division, the nervous system is divided into central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. And all these divisions have their specific roles. The divisions, the central nervous system, they have the role they play. The peripheral nervous system, they also have the role they play. And this system is very sensitive to stimuli. This system, very, very, very sensitive to stimuli. And the reason why that is possible is because this system includes specialized receptors, especially receptors that constantly help you to monitor your environment. Because you see, as a human being, you can imagine you're in an environment. Every time the weather condition is changing, you may have to smell something around, you may have to feel something will touch your body. So it means that constantly some receptors in your body are being engaged. And all receptors carry or respond to certain stimuli and help to communicate to the brain and spinal cord. Okay, so they are very sensitive. The nervous system is a very sensitive system, very sensitive, especially to external environment. Okay, good. And then it coordinates complex responses. Okay, so the nervous system integrates sensory inputs, motor outputs, and that helps control everything from reflexes, breathing to speech, and then also even to your conscious thoughts. Okay, and again, lastly, the nervous system is adaptable and plastic. In physiology, we say neuroplasticity. If we say neuroplasticity, what it means is that they are capable of reorganizing and forming new neural connections. They can easily adapt. So, for example, someone who had not trained the brain to learn properly, the person can train the brain to learn properly. Okay, the nervous system is not like a fixed system that you can't modify. It's a system that is adaptable. That is how come you are able to learn something new. You are able to learn a new skill. You're able to think and take new decisions. You're able to change your thoughts or your thinking. It's because you see the system we are dealing with is an adaptable system. It's plastic, or you say neuroplasticity. When we say neuroplasticity, is that ability for your nervous system to adjust, okay, and make new changes, okay, especially neural connections, okay, and once new neural connections are being formed, it's an indication that someone is learning, picking up a new experience, or probably the person has been exposed to an injury. And you see, this is very important, especially when it comes to recovering, when it comes to learning, when it comes to memory. Is that okay? Yeah, so it's possible for you to memorize new things because you see, the nervous system is adaptable. And that is one of the reasons why, as human beings, we're able to learn. We go into new environments, we're able to learn people's names because our nervous system is adaptable. They can adapt. Is that okay? Good. They are not, it's not like something that is fixed that you can't alter. Is that okay? So, or you can say it is plastic. Plastic simply means the nervous system is capable of reorganizing and forming new neural connections. Is that okay? So, for example, if you are learning something new, for example, you take a certain course and you are learning, you know, neural connections are formed for that thing that you are learning. For example, if you decide to learn a new skill, is that okay? Let's say you are learning a certain skill. Okay, your brain begins to form neural connections for that activity.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah. And imagine that, okay, let's imagine that the nervous system was not adaptable. What it means is that you wouldn't have been able to learn something new. That's the meaning. But because this system is adaptable or neuroplastic, that enables you to be able to learn something new. So it means new neural connections can be formed for new things that you encounter in life. And that's how come, even now, if you say you want to learn a new skill, your brain is ready to create neural connections for you to learn that, provided you are going to be consistent to learn those things. Is that okay? That's the beauty of the nervous system. Or like, we have some systems, you can't change them. For example, if you take the skeletal system, at a certain point in your life, they are not adaptable. You can't change them any longer. The cells are fixed. Is that okay? You can't change them. But for the nervous system, they are adaptable and what? And plastic. And in physiology or neurophysiology, we say neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the nervous system to reorganize, form new neural connections, such that you are able to learn, experience, okay, maybe you even recover from an injury, okay, and that is very essential when it comes to understanding how your memory works, when it comes to learning, and when it even comes to your body recovering from certain situations or conditions. Okay, and I mentioned earlier on that the nervous system communicates using electrical and chemical signals. Do you remember? I mentioned that the nervous system, we have the endocrine system. Usually with the endocrine system communicates using only chemical signals. But the nervous system communicates using what? Electrical and chemical signals. Is that okay? Great. Great. Good. And then good. Great. Look at something very interesting over here. The brain uses about 20% of your body's energy. And remember, I mentioned that out of your total blood supply or your total body's blood supply, the nervous system alone receives about 20% of that. Okay. And then your brain also uses about 20% of your body's energy. That tells you how active is that. And that's the reason why, especially if you are going to learn, it's not good to go and learn when you are not having adequate energy. Is that okay? Yes, you should have, because your brain uses a lot of energy. Is that okay? Yes. So it is an energy demanding system. Look at it. Energy demanding system. Okay. And your brain uses about 20% of your body's energy. Now, the nervous system is made up of neurons. Okay. And the neurons help to transmit impulses. Later on, or as we move forward, we will look at neurons as a topic on its own. Look at the various types of neurons and then their functions, and then the various parts of neurons. Okay, good. So the nervous system is made up of neurons which transmit impulses. We have the neuroglia which supports and protects the neurons. Neuroglia are more like immune cells that support neurons. Okay, yes, we have, every system, we usually have some cells that play more like immune roles or protective roles. In the nervous system, neuroglia play protective roles for neurons. So more like they support and protect neurons. So neuroglia are more like immune cells or protective cells in the nervous system. Specifically, they protect neurons. Okay, and these tissues work together to maintain fast, precise, efficient communication throughout the nervous system. Now, there is something interesting over here. Now, look, nerve impulses can travel at a speed of up to 268 mph. And this is very serious. Meters per hour, 268 meters per hour. And this can outpace most Formula One cars. You know, the cars that they use for racing. Let me show you an example. You see these cars that they use for racing. There's Formula One. We call them the Formula One cars. Most of these Formula One cars, their speed is 230 mph. But look at the nervous system. The nervous system can run, it travels, the impulses in nervous system, they travel at a speed of 268 meters per hour. And that is a serious deal. And it means that nerve impulses are even faster than some Formula One cars. Is that okay? Yes. If you are someone who follow racing a lot, one of the record-breaking Formula One cars is the Koenigsegg Absolute. Okay, it's one of the world's fastest supercars or the hypercars, and this car travels at a speed of 330 meters per hour. But you know, nerve impulses speed is almost closer to this supercars, and that is a serious deal. Is that okay? This is the car I'm talking about. Okay, it's one of the fastest or hyper or supercars that we have in racing, in the sports of racing. And nerve impulse, look at the speed of nerve impulse, 268 meters per hour. That tells you that the nervous system is not a joke. If you've sat down to watch some of these racing before, and we tell you that, okay, this is how fast the nervous system travels, it tells you that nervous system is not a joke. How communication happens in nervous system is not a child's play. Is that okay? It's super fast, super fast. Okay, super fast. Okay, great. Now, in anatomy and physiology, we study nervous system through what we call neuroanatomy or neurophysiology. So what we are saying is, in anatomy and physiology, the nervous system is studied through what we call neuroanatomy. Neuroanatomy is about it's you focusing on studying the structure of the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. So when you are under nervous system, what we are going to learn as under human anatomy, we are going to do neuroanatomy. So anytime you decide to study the structure of the brain, the structure of the spinal cord and nerves, we say we say that you are doing neuroanatomy. But the moment you start to study the functions of the brain, the functions of nerves, the functions of nerve impulses, reflexes, neural communication, we say that you are studying neurophysiology. So if someone tells you, I'm going to study neuroanatomy, it means the person is going to study the structure of the brain, parts of the brain, divisions of the brain, functions of the brain. Functions of the brain is under neurophysiology. The person is going to study structure of the spinal cord, parts of the spinal cord, and then if someone tells you that I'm going to study structure and parts of the nerves, the person is going to study neuroanatomy. So anytime someone is studying structure of the brain, structure of the spinal cord, parts of the brain, parts of the spinal cord, types of nerves, parts of nerves, divisions of nerves, the person is studying neuroanatomy. But if you are studying functions of the brain, functions of nerves, functions of nerve impulses, reflex action, neural communication, how neural communication occurs, you are studying what we call neurophysiology. Is that okay? Yes, these are some concepts that you have to know. Now, in medicine, the field is called neurology. Neurology. When you go to medicine, okay, the field is referred to as neurology. What that means is that neurology is a branch of medicine that focuses on diagnosing and treating people with nervous system disorders. Is that okay? And we even have another term we call neurosurgery. All surgical procedures that involve the brain, that involves the spinal cord, that involves the peripheral nerves, all comes under neurosurgery. Okay, so when we ask you a branch of medicine that focuses on treating and diagnosing individuals with nervous system disorders, or branch of medicine focuses on diagnosing and treating people with nervous system disorders. Yes, neurology. Yes, neurology. All right. If we ask you, okay, what branch of medicine focuses on or involves the surgical treatment of the brain, the spinal cord, and peripheral nerves?
Neurosurgery.
Yes, that is neurosurgery. Or we can ask you, what branch of surgery focuses on surgical treatment of brain-related conditions, spinal cord-related conditions, and peripheral nerves? What branch of surgery? Neurosurgery. Is that okay? Neurosurgery. Okay, good. So anatomy and physiology, nervous system is studied under neuroanatomy. So when we say neuroanatomy, meaning we are going to concentrate on what? Our concentration is going to be on we trying to study the structure of the brain, the structure of the spinal cord, and the nerves. When we say neurophysiology, the concentration is now on trying to study the functions of the brain, functions of nerves and nerve impulses, reflexes, and then neural communication. And I mentioned that in medicine, the branch of medicine that focuses on diagnosing and treating people or individuals who are suffering from nervous system disorders, okay, that is neurology. And the branch of surgery that involves the surgical treatment of conditions affecting the brain, spinal cord, and even peripheral nerves, that is neurosurgery. Is that okay? Good. Now, these are some few terminologies that you should know before we take off. There are more, but I just keep just 5 of them over here for you to pay attention to. These are very common terminologies that you'll be hearing a lot when we are doing the nervous system. Okay, we have neuron. Neuron is the basic structural and functional unit of the nervous system. Okay, what is the basic structural and functional unit of the urinary system? What is the basic functional unit of the urinary system?
The nephron.
Yes, the nephron. The nephron. Yes, the nephron. That is the basic functional and structural unit of the urinary system. For the nervous system, the basic structural and functional unit is the neuron. What that means is that if you look at all the activities in the nervous system, chiefly or primarily, they are performed by neurons. That's what we are trying to say. So if we look at all the activities, a summary of the functions of the nervous system, primarily, the structure behind those activities is the neuron. That is what we mean. That doesn't mean the neuron is the only structure or the only element that is functioning in this system. We may have other organs and structures, but then the chief structure over here, the structure that plays major role or key role in this system is the neuron. That's the basic structure and then functional unit of the nervous system. Okay, and a nerve cell can transmit electrical impulse. Now, a neuron is also called a nerve. So sometimes you hear a neuron or a nerve is the same thing. Either you call it a neuron or a nerve cell. Is that okay? So there are some textbooks you see neuron. There are some textbooks you see nerve cell. It's the same thing. So this is an example of a neuron. See, this is what we are calling a neuron. This structure over here. It's a neuron. And we are saying that this is the chief organ or structure in the nervous system. This structure you are seeing over here is the primary organ or primary structure in the nervous system. It's the basic structure and functional unit of the nervous system. You can also call it a nerve cell. Okay, a nerve cell. Now we have what we call a ganglion. A ganglion. What is a ganglion? A ganglion is a cluster of neuron cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. Usually they appear as a swelling along the nerves. Let me show you a typical example. So you see, usually if you take the so you see this is the peripheral nervous system. Usually the connection between, so you see this one is the spinal cord. This one is the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system is coming to connect to the spinal cord. Usually at this area, at this junction, there is always a structure that looks like a swelling. Okay, let me see whether it will be clear. Let me check whether it will be clear in the other diagrams. Okay, good. I think this diagram is better. So look over here. So you see there is something like something swelled up over here, where the peripheral nervous system, look at where the peripheral nervous system is coming to connect. It's like something is swelled up over here. It's as a result of a connection of multiple nerves. Okay, and that is what we call a ganglion. Okay, so when we say a ganglion is more like a connection. Is that okay? Yes, it's like a connection of when several nerves are coming together. Is that okay? Good. So a cluster of neuron cell bodies, okay, in the peripheral nervous system, often appearing as a swelling along the nerves. Okay, good. Then we have the nucleus. Okay, a nucleus in neuroanatomy. A nucleus is a cluster of neuron cell bodies within the central nervous system. Now, you also come across these terms, but when we get there, when we start looking at the central nervous system, the brain, I'll explain this nucleus again. Is that okay? When we say nucleus, it's just a cluster of neuron cell bodies within the central nervous system. We call it a nucleus. But when we say a cluster of neuron cell bodies in the PNS, that is a ganglion. Okay, so when the cell bodies of different neurons are coming together and merging together in the peripheral nervous system, we call that a ganglion. But when the same cell bodies of neurons are merging together inside the central nervous system, that is a nucleus. Okay, and then I'll explain that into. So if you come over here, you see here, we have several nerves. This is the peripheral nervous system. So when the neuron cell bodies, these are all individual nerves. When the cell bodies are coming together, when the cell bodies of two or more neurons merge together inside the peripheral nervous system, that is what we call ganglion. But when the neuron cell bodies of neurons come together in central nervous system, that is called the nucleus. Okay, and then we will look at that practically. I'll show you diagrams of all that when we move on. Then we have what we call synapse. A synapse is like the junction between two neurons. So you see, this is a neuron. Look at this one. It's a neuron. We can have another neuron that will join this very neuron. This one. We can have the same thing that will come and join this one over here, where the terminal is. So if you check this diagram here, you see this diagram. This one is a neuron on its own. This is a neuron. This one is also another neuron. So you see, this is a neuron. This one may be another neuron or maybe probably a muscle. Is that okay? But then the point we are seeing is that the junction between two neurons or a neuron and another cell, which can be a muscle cell. So the junction between two neurons and a neuron and another cell, that is what we call a synapse. So you see over here, there is a junction between this neuron. This is one neuron. And this is also another neuron. You see there is a junction here. We call this junction a synapse. Synapse. So a synapse is basically the junction between two neurons or a neuron and another cell. So when we say a synapse, it's the junction between two neurons or a neuron and another cell. Is that okay? That is what we call a synapse. Excellent. Good. So we have a synapse, and then we have neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemical substances that are released at the synapse that transmit signals across the gap to the next cell. So you see here, we have a synapse over here. So before this neuron will be able to communicate with this neuron, usually certain chemical substances are released into the synapse. So before this neuron is going to communicate to this neuron. The communication means it's going to send a signal to this neuron. Now, before this neuron will be able to send this signal, will be able to communicate, usually certain neurotransmitters or substances are released into the synapse. And that substances is what we call neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are basically chemical substances that are released by neurons into synapse or as synaptic junctions across what? as synaptic junctions to help transmit signals from one neuron to the other. Okay, so when we say a neurotransmitter, they are chemicals that are released by neurons at synaptic junctions to help with signal transmission. Okay, so before this neuron will be able to communicate to this neuron, there have to be release of neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are the chemicals that will help the signal here to move here. Is the neurotransmitters. Is that so? When we say neurotransmitters, they are chemical substances that are released by neurons at synaptic junctions to help with signal transmission. That is what we call neurotransmitters. Now, this is the last thing we are going to discuss for today. This we will end here. We will end today with this discussion. Now, I want you to pay attention very well and then make sure you understand this slide once and for all, because we ask questions on this slide a lot. In fact, in exams, we can ask you to, to draw this diagram. With the aid of a diagram, explain the divisions of the nervous system. Or we can ask you to just do a diagrammatic presentation of the nervous system. This diagram, what you are seeing, a diagrammatic presentation of the nervous system. So for today, this is what we are going to do. So I want your full attention over here. Now, first of all, the nervous system has two major anatomical divisions. Now, the first division, I've started. The first division, we have the central nervous system, and then we have the second division, which is the peripheral nervous system. So the nervous system, we have two divisions. We have the central nervous system. Under the central nervous system, we have the brain and then the spinal cord. Now, in the second division, we have the peripheral nervous system. Under the peripheral nervous system, we have all the nerves and ganglia outside the CNS. You remember when we say ganglion, you remember what it means. Ganglion is when the neuron cell bodies, come together within the peripheral nervous system. So when we say peripheral nervous system, we are talking about all the nerves. Let me show you the diagram. So this is what we mean. We are saying that the nervous system is made up of two divisions. We have the central nervous system. So this brain plus this spinal cord give us what? The central nervous system. So when we ask you what is central nervous system, it's simple. It's made up of the brain and the spinal cord. What is central nervous system? It's simple. It's made up of the brain and then the spinal cord. What is peripheral nervous system? It's also simple. It's made up of nerves and then the ganglia. Okay, or the ganglions. Okay, so if we ask you what is central nervous system, the central nervous system is made up of the brain and then the spinal cord. What is peripheral nervous system? It's made up of the nerves, all the nerves in your body, and then the ganglia. Simple as that. So there are two main divisions of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. So if I ask you, okay, what forms the central nervous system? Yes. What forms the central nervous system? What will be your response?
The brain and the spinal cord.
Brain.
Wow, that is excellent. That is excellent. That is excellent. So the spinal cord and then the brain. Okay, what forms the peripheral nervous system?
All the nerves in the body and the ganglia.
Come again.
All nerves and the ganglia.
That is fine. So all the nerves and the ganglia outside your central nervous system. Meaning we are looking at the ganglia within the peripheral nervous system. Okay, yeah. So the first thing you have to know is you should know the divisions, the two main divisions. And that is what we have over here. So you see we have the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system, all the nerves and ganglia outside the CNS. Now, we will not look at further divisions of the central nervous system, but we have further divisions of peripheral nervous system. Now, the peripheral nervous system can further be divided into two two main divisions or two functional divisions. Or we say the peripheral nervous system is further divided into two functional divisions. The peripheral nervous system, it has two functional divisions. So we have the sensory division of the peripheral nervous system and then the motor division. So the peripheral nervous system, we have the sensory division and then the motor division. Okay, the sensory division, you can also call it the afferent division. When we say something is afferent from urinary system, what does it mean? When we say something is afferent, what does it mean? Yes, when we say something is afferent from your knowledge from urinary system, what does it mean?
The one that begins.
Yes. Yes, afferent. What does it mean? What comes into your mind?
Something that carries information towards central control.
Good. So it means that the sensory division, they carry information from the peripheral nervous system towards the CNS. Okay, that's why we are calling them the sensory division. So if you say a nerve is a sensory nerve, meaning it carries information towards the CNS, towards the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so the peripheral nervous system, we have two divisions of the peripheral nervous system. We have the sensory division. You know, peripheral nervous system is about nerves. So we have nerves that carry information to the brain. Okay, we call them the efferent nerves. So they carry information to the brain, meaning they transmit signals to the CNS. You see, it's here. They transmit signals to what? To the CNS, the central nervous system. Then we have the motor or efferent division. What does it mean? They carry signals from the CNS to effectors. So you see, for example, let's say you touch a hot object. Now, hot part, which nerve is going to carry that signal that, okay, your hand is in contact with a hot object? Which division of the peripheral nervous system will take the signal to your central nervous system? Is the sensory division. So it's a sensory nerve that will pick the signal and send it to the brain that, okay, this gentleman has touched a hot object. Okay, so the nerve that will carry that information from the affected parts of your body to the brain, it falls under the sensory division of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, now, the information has been sent to your brain. You have to move your hands away. Which nerve is going to bring that signal from your brain to the spinal cord? That is what we call the motor division. So the motor nerve, the motor division, that's why we call it the efferent division. Efferent. Okay, so they carry signals from the CNS to the effectors, or from your CNS to what? The affected parts or the structures that initially receive the stimuli. Okay, now again, the sensory division can further be divided into two. Now, the sensory division, remember, let me explain. Remember, the sensory division, what do? They carry signals from where? From all parts of your body. So these are nerves that are carrying information from all parts of your body to your central nervous system. Now, the motor division, what are they doing? They are carrying information from your brain. Okay, they are carrying information from your CNS to effectors. Now, we have further divisions. We have two divisions of the sensory nerves or sensory division of the peripheral nervous system. We have the somatic sensory, and then we have the visceral sensory division. Somatic sensory division, and then we have the visceral sensory division. Now, when we say somatic sensory, so for example, let's assume you touch a hot object, that is your skin, okay, or someone try to prick you with, let's say, a needle. Okay, the stimulus is on your skin. Now, which nerve is going to carry it? Is the sensory division, but specifically, it's a somatic sensory nerve. Specifically, it's a somatic sensory nerve. Now, when we say a somatic sensory division, Now, these are nerves that are carrying information to the brain, but then they are carrying information from your skin, your muscles, your bones, and your joints. So when we say somatic sensory division, they are nerves that are carrying information to your brain and spinal cord, but then they are bringing them from your skin, bringing them from muscles, bringing them from bones and joints. Now, we have the visceral sensory. For example, let me give you an example. If an information has to be sent through a nerve to your brain from your heart, let's say your heart, or let's say your stomach, have to send a signal to your central nervous system, it will go through the visceral sensory. Now, remember, you were taught in Anatomy 1 that anytime you hear visceral, it means something that is associated to an organ. You did that in Anatomy 1. Anytime you hear visceral, it means something related to an organ, especially internal organs. Okay, anytime you hear viscera, it means something related to internal organs, organs that are within your body, internal organs, like the heart, like the lungs, like the stomach. Most of the time when you hear viscera, we are referring to visceral organs. We are referring to internal organs like the heart, internal organs like the lungs, internal organs like the stomach. Okay, so for example, something is wrong in your stomach. Your stomach have to send information through a nerve to your brain and spinal cord. Which nerve is going to do that? It's the visceral sensory nerve. Is that okay? The visceral sensory nerve. Okay, that will send the information to your central nervous system. Okay, now something is wrong in your joints. A signal have to be sent to your central nervous system. Okay, which part of the peripheral nervous system will do that? Is the sensory division, specifically the somatic sensory. Okay, again, okay, something is wrong in your lungs. We need the information to get to the central nervous system. Which part of the nervous system will do that? Is the peripheral nervous system, specifically the sensory division, more specifically the visceral sensory. Another example, something is wrong in your stomach. We need the information to get to the brain and spinal cord. Which part of the nervous system will do that? Is the peripheral nervous system. Okay, specifically the sensory division of the peripheral nervous system. More specifically, the visceral sensory division. Is that okay? Okay, something is wrong inside your bones. We need the information to go to your CNS. Which part of the nervous system will do that? Is the peripheral nervous system. But under the peripheral nervous system, the sensory division. Why is it the sensory division? Because you see now, the information is coming from another part of the body to the CNS. So we need the sensory. Because the sensory is any nerve that is carrying information towards the CNS. So when we say something is a sensory nerve, any nerve carrying information from all other parts of your body towards your brain and spinal cord is a sensory nerve. So for example, if something is wrong in your muscle and we want the information to be communicated to your central nervous system, which division is the peripheral nervous system? But specifically, which part of the peripheral nervous system? The sensory division. More specifically, which part of the sensory division? The somatic sensory. Why? Because the somatic sensory is the sensory nerve that carries signals or impulses from the skin, the muscles, the bones, and then the joints. Is that okay? Great. Let me ask you this question. Someone is having a problem in the heart, and we want the information to be sent to the brain and spinal cord. Which broad division of the nervous system do you think will be responsible?
The sensory division.
Please pay attention. Pay attention. Now, something is wrong.
Nervous system.
Yes, come again. What did you say?
The peripheral nervous system.
Good, the peripheral nervous system. So the question is that something is wrong inside your heart. We want the information to be communicated, to be sent from your heart to the brain and spinal cord. Which broad division of the nervous system will be responsible for that?
The central nervous system.
Oh, why are you deviating? Did you listen to the question? You didn't listen to the question. Once you mention central nervous system, it means you didn't listen to the question. Now, the principle is very simple. Anytime an information have to be sent from any part of the body to the brain, the central don't comes in. Then straight away, it means you don't understand central. Peripheral has got to do with all nerves that are at different parts of the body, with the exception of the brain and the spinal. And here we are talking about the heart. So how can you be talking about central? We are talking about the heart. Is that okay? Yes. So we said something is wrong with the heart. Okay, something is wrong with the heart. And we want that information to be sent to the brain. All division of the nervous system will be responsible. Yes.
The peripheral nervous system.
Good. Excellent. The peripheral nervous system. Okay. Now, specifically, which division of the peripheral nervous system?
The visceral.
The sensory.
Yes, the sensory division. Then under the sensory division, the visceral. Under the sensory division, the visceral sensory division. Is that okay? Great. So for okay, let me give another example. Okay, someone is having a problem in their bones, and we want that information to be sent to the central nervous system. Which part of the nervous system will be responsible for that? Good. So this is how you answer it. Your answer is not one. No. So you say, okay, sir, there is the peripheral nervous system, specifically the sensory division, more specifically the somatic sensory. That's how we answer it. You not say peripheral nervous, no. So if we ask you, okay, someone is having a problem in the stomach, which part of the the nervous system will be responsible for that? Then you say, okay, say in between central nervous and peripheral nervous is the peripheral. Specifically, the sensory division of the peripheral. More specifically, because it's the heart, and the heart is a visceral organ, is the visceral sensory division. Okay, someone is having a problem with the stomach. Okay, which parts of the nervous system will be responsible for that? Yeah, someone is having a problem with the stomach. We want the information to be sent to the CNS. Which parts of the nervous system will be responsible for that?
The peripheral nervous system, more specifically the sensory division, but more specifically to the visual sensory, because the stomach is a visual organ.
Excellent. That's how you explain it. That's how you explain it. Okay, now let's look at the other division. Then I can ask a blend of questions for both. Okay, let's look at the other division. Now, with the next division, remember I mentioned that the peripheral nerves can be divided into sensory, which I've explained the sensory division. Let's look at the motor division. Now, the motor division is about, you see, someone is having a problem in the heart. Okay, the sensory have sent the information from the heart to the CNS. Now, the brain will process it and send information back. When the brain is sending the information back, it will go through a motor nerve. So when we say a nerve is a motor nerve, what it means is that that nerve is bringing information from the CNS to another part of the body. So if we need a nerve to bring an information, or a part of the nervous system to bring an information, okay, from the central nervous system to go and communicate to another organ, we use the motor division. So the motor division carries from the CNS. All right, so under the motor division, we have two other further divisions. We have the somatic motor division, and then we have the visceral motor division. Now, let me explain to make it simple for you. When we say somatic motor division, okay, somatic motor division. Now, if your brain is sending an information, is that okay? To a structure, and information is coming from your brain to a structure that has a voluntary control, meaning a structure that you have control over. It uses the somatic control. So, for example, let's say your brain, let's say something is wrong with your hands, okay? Your hand, your hand, you have voluntary control. You can decide to close your hand and open your hand yourself, okay? Your leg, you can decide to put your leg down, raise your leg yourself. You have voluntary control over it. Now, if information have to come from your brain and then come and tell your hand something, it will come through the somatic motor division. Why? Why are we using somatic? You have voluntary control over that. They are made up of skeletal muscles. So you have voluntary control. But listen, let's say your brain is bringing an information. Your brain is bringing an information. Okay? The information is coming to control something that you have no control. For example, if your brain wants to communicate to your heart, you don't have control over it. Your heart, you can't decide to tell your heart to stop pumping or pump faster. You can't tell your heart to do that. So if your brain wants to communicate to the heart, and information should come from the brain, it will pass through what we call a visceral motor. So when we say a visceral motor, meaning that nerve or neuron is bringing information to a part of the body that you don't have control over. All right, so if I ask you that, okay, if we need a part of the nervous system to communicate or bring an information from your brain to the heart, which part of the nervous system will do that? Is the peripheral nervous system. More specifically, the motor division. Under the motor division, the visceral motor. Let me go over it again. If we need your nervous system have to send an information. Your brain have to send an information to your heart. Which part of the nervous system is it going to use? It will use the peripheral nervous system. More specifically, it will use the motor division. Why? Because the information is coming from your brain to another part of the body. So it's the motor. If the information was moving from the part of your body to your brain, that would be sensory. But if the information is moving from your brain to another part of your body, it's the motor. If your brain have to send information to another part of your body, it will use the motor division. Is that okay? Yes. So the motor division is into two. If your brain have to send an information to a part of your body you have control, you have total control over, it will use the somatic motor division or a somatic motor neuron. Okay? If your brain have to send an information to an organ that you can't control, how the organ works, you have no control over it. The brain will use the visceral motor division. Now, that visceral motor division, in anatomy and physiology, that is what we call the autonomic nervous system. So if you've been hearing autonomic nervous system, another name for it is the visceral division. We call it the visceral motor division of the nervous system. Okay, good. So let me give you an example. Now, your brain have to send an information. There is a problem in a gland in your body. There is a problem that is affecting a gland in your body. Okay, and that problem, the information have to be sent to the brain and spinal cord. Which division of the nervous system will send that information? Let me take the question again. There is a problem going on in a certain gland inside your body. Now, which part of the nervous system will help to send that problem, the information, the signal, to the brain and spinal cord? Yes. If you say peripheral nervous system, you've not answered the question.
Peripheral nervous system, and then specifically to the visual sensory.
Good. Yes, that is correct. So the peripheral nervous system, specifically sensory division, more specifically visceral sensory, Okay. Now, for the somatic sensory, it's just limited to the skin, muscles, bones, and joints. Finish. If you don't see muscles, bones, and joints, all other things falls under visceral sensory. Okay. And again, those of you who are lost, again, once we are communicating information from a part of the body towards the brain, it's sensory. It's sensory. Once we want information to move from other parts of the body towards the brain, that is a sensory division that will do that work. Okay, now, the information have now been sent to the brain from the visceral sensory division. Now, the brain wants to communicate back to the gland. Which part of the nervous system will do that? The brain wants to send the information back to the gland. Which part of the nervous system will do that?
Peripheral nervous system.
Peripheral nervous.
Specifically, the
Motor
division.
Specifically, the motor division.
More
More
specifically,
specifically,
the
the
visual
visceral motor.
More specifically, the visceral motor division. That is excellent. That is excellent. This shows that the mind is coming home. Okay. Someone is having a problem in the hand and the muscles inside the hand. Is that okay? Now, the information have been sent or communicated to the brain already. The brain wants to communicate back for the person to raise the hand. Is that okay? Now, which division of the nervous system will be engaged?
The peripheral nervous system. Specifically.
Okay.
More specifically, the somatic motor division.
Why?
Because the brain is sending the message to the hand, and then we have control over the hand.
Good. And the hand is a structure that you have voluntary control over, because we have skeletal muscles over there. Okay. And you have controls over those skeletal. So once your brain is communicating any information to a part of the body you have voluntary control over, it will use somatic motor. So you can think of, but there are few. Okay, any structure in your body that you have voluntary control over. If your brain have to, can you think of any other structure? We did some under urinary system. If your brain have to communicate to any structure you can control, which activity in your body can you control? Yes. Which other activity in your body do you have voluntary control over? Yes, which other activity? But the summary is that usually most activities you have voluntary control over, they involve skeletal muscles. Okay, most activities you have voluntary control over, they involve skeletal muscles. Now, the principle is that if your brain have to communicate to any activity that you have control over, you can decide how your body does it. For example, raising your hand, you have control over it. Standing up, you have control over it. Sitting down, you have control over it. If your brain have to bring a signal for you to take that action, it will use the somatic motor. Okay, so for example, let's say a patient suddenly stood up from her bed. Okay, now within that activity, which part of the nervous system was engaged?
Peripheral nervous system, specifically motor division, but more specifically the somatic motor division.
Yes, because it's the peripheral nervous system. Okay, specific, because the brain have to bring that information, and the information will come through the peripheral nervous system. Specifically, it will come through the motor. Why? Because the information is coming from the brain to that organ. So it's the motor. But under the motor, the information is coming to a part of the body that you have voluntary control over. So it will use the somatic motor. Once you have control over that part the information is coming to, you use the somatic motor. All right, let's do another example.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Sir.
Yes.
Please, I have a question.
Yes, ask your question.
Okay, sir. Let's say, for instance, the urinary system.
The urinary system, okay.
And the motor, yes, and the periphery sensory.
Yes, go ahead. Your network is not helping you.
You want to wee.
Okay.
You can control your bladder.
Okay.
Sometimes you so that one take motor or motor.
Can you come again with your question, because your network was interrupting along the process?
Okay. So, sir, please, my question is, because the brain sends information to other parts of the body.
Okay.
The urinary tract system.
Okay, that is fine.
And the motor, peripheral nervous system.
Good.
And specifically motor division.
Okay, that is fine.
Where will I put? Is it somatic or visceral motor system?
Yeah, your question have to be very specific,
because when you want.
Yes, Akosia, your question have to be very specific. Now you are an anatomist too, so don't say urinary system, then you end it there. Urinary system, we have so many structures. The urinary system, are you talking about the bladder? Are you talking about the kidney?
I'm talking about the bladder.
Good, so be specific so that people will understand you. Now you are an anatomist, so when you are talking, so you are talking about the bladder.
So the bladder,
right? So
yes, the brain will tell you that your body wants to wee. But you can control your bladder now.
Good. So now you are not talking about bladder. So now you are not talking about bladder. Now you are talking about sphincters. Yes. So from the deduction I'm making from your question, you are trying to talk about sphincters. Because if you are talking about bladder, we have what we call the detrusor muscles. You don't have control over that. It's involuntary. So if your brain wants to communicate to the detrusor muscles, you are not involved. So it will not use somatic motor. It will use the visceral motor. But when it comes to the sphincters, we have the internal sphincters and we have the external sphincters. Which one is voluntary? Which of the sphincters is voluntary? The internal sphincter and the external sphincter. Which one is voluntary?
The external.
Oh, then the young lady didn't join the lecture, so she is thinking to ask a question. Yes, we have the internal sphincters and then we have the external sphincters. We learned it in urinary system that the internal sphincters, they are involuntary, but the external sphincters are voluntary. If the brain have to send an information for you to constantly relax your sphincter, your external sphincters, the information will come through the somatic motor. Is that okay? The information will come to the somatic motor. But if communication should come to the internal sphincters, it will come through the visceral sensory. Is that okay? Yeah. So it's a very simple principle. Is that okay? Yeah. So even if you learn the urinary system into detail, and you even want to go more detail into the sphincters, how they work, we have a nerve we call the pudendal nerve. You can write it down and read that. We have a nerve we call the pudendal nerve. The pudendal nerve is a somatic nerve. It's a type of somatic nerve. Okay, it's a type of somatic nerve that tells you that if the brain wants to communicate to the external sphincters, it will use a somatic nerve. So you can search for pudendal nerve. It's a subtype of a somatic nerve. And that tells you that if the brain wants to communicate to the external sphincter, it will communicate to it through the somatic motor division. Why? The external sphincter, you have voluntary control over it. So the principle is that, so it's good. Your question is a very good case study for you to understand these things. So the principle is that if your brain have to communicate to any part of your body that you are sure that part of your body you have voluntary control over, or that kind of activity you have voluntary control over, it will use the somatic motor division. Okay, specifically of the motor division. Okay, good. Another example, your brain wants to communicate to, excellent. So your brain wants to communicate to, let's say, your cardiac muscles. Okay, your brain wants to communicate to your cardiac muscles. Is that okay? There is a problem in your cardiac muscles. Information have been sent to your brain. Your brain wants to communicate to your cardiac muscles. Now, which division of the nervous system would be involved in this activity?
peripheral, specifically motor nerve division, and the more
Okay.
specifically the visceral motor.
The visceral motor, yes, or the autonomic nervous system. All right, let me ask another question. Okay, so you are assisting a patient who used the washroom, and the patient, you've returned the patient back to bed. These patients have to sit down. Now, in the process of sitting down, which division of the nervous system would be engaged or involved?
The peripheral nervous system,
Okay.
specifically the motor division.
Okay.
More specifically the somatic motor division.
That is excellent. That is excellent. Okay, now listen to this question. Listen to this question. Now, a patient's heart is beating faster. Listen carefully. A patient's heart is beating faster. Very, 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 very fast. Now, the information has been sent to the brain. Which part of the nervous system would be involved during sending the information to the brain?
Peripheral.
Okay, peripheral.
The sensory.
The sensory division, okay.
And more specifically, the visceral.
More specifically, the visceral sensory. Okay, now, the information has been processed. The brain wants to now communicate back to the heart. Okay, now, how was the initial response? The heart is beating faster. The brain wants to now communicate back to the heart so that the heart starts beating calmly or slow. Which part of the peripheral nervous system will be engaged?
The motor.
The motor.
But more specifically the autonomic nervous system.
More specifically, the visceral motor or autonomic nervous system. Are you done? Under the visceral motor, more specifically, the parasympathetic. Because you see, remember, the initial stimulus was that the heart is beating faster, and we want the heart to calm. Now, you know, under the visceral motor, it's further divided. We have the sympathetic, which is responsible for arousal of your body. If we want some activities to increase, let's say we want your heart rate to increase, okay, we want your a gland activity to increase, we want to achieve, let's say, your respiratory rate to increase, we want your blood pressure to increase. The part of the visceral motor that will be engaged is the sympathetic. Okay, so the question I ask is that a patient's heart is beating so fast. The information has been sent to the brain. The brain is bringing the information back to the heart so that the heart calms down. Yes, you are right. It will come through the motor division. It will come through the somatic motor. It will come through the motor division, specifically under the motor division, the visceral motor. Why? We don't have control over your heart. But then, under the visceral motor, because we want to achieve calmness of the body, because the heart is beating faster, the part of the visceral motor that is responsible for calming your body is the parasympathetic. You see how interesting it is? Okay, let me give you another example. Let's say your respiratory rate is so fast, very, very, very high. Is that okay? Your respiratory rate is very high. Is that okay? Great. We want to engage your central nervous system so that your central nervous system brings an information to help control your respiratory rate. Now, which part of the peripheral nervous system will be engaged? We want your brain to send an information to help control your respiratory rate. Which part of the peripheral nervous system will be engaged?
The motor division.
The motor division.
Specifically the visual motor division.
Specifically the visceral motor.
But more specifically the parasympathetic.
More specifically parasympathetic. Why? Why? Because the information that is coming to make your body calm, or is coming to make an activity calm. Is that okay? Okay, now let me do the opposite example. Someone is having a very low heart rate. The heart rate is very, very low. Now, the information has been sent to the brain. Now, the brain is bringing back a response to come and correct it. Which division of the peripheral nervous system will be engaged in this process?
The motor division.
The motor division. Why?
Because the brain is bringing back.
Excellent. Because the information is coming from the brain towards another part of the body. That is correct. Next.
The visual motor.
The visceral motor. Why?
Because it's an involuntary.
Because it's an involuntary activity. Excellent.
Then there's sympathetic.
Why sympathetic?
Because the temperature is very low and we want it to
be high.
Right.
Yeah, it was heart rate rather, because the heart rate is very low and we want to achieve an increase, so it will use sympathetic. Is that okay? It will use sympathetic. Okay, let me give another example. Okay, now let's say that now the sympathetic has been engaged and the heart rate has started increasing again. Which part of the peripheral nervous will now send the information back? Which part of the nervous system will now be engaged?
The peripheral nervous.
The peripheral, specifically
the sensory. Okay, because now we want the information to go to the brain. Then under the sensory, which part?
The visual sensory.
The visual sensory. Why? Because the problem is coming from an internal organ, a visceral organ. Is that okay? Great. That is fine. Okay, let me give you another example. A patient is having there is a hyperactivity of, let's say, the thyroid gland. There is a hyperactivity. Listen carefully. There is a hyperactivity of the thyroid gland. And we want the thyroid gland to calm down. Now, the brain has received that information that the thyroid gland is hyperactive and has sent an information down to the thyroid gland. Which part of the peripheral nervous will be engaged?
Motor division.
Yes, the motor division. That is correct.
Specifically the visceral motor division.
Specifically the visceral motor division.
And then under the visceral motor division, the parasympathetic.
And under the visceral motor division, the parasympathetic division. Why the parasympathetic division?
Because
we want the activity of the gland to be calm.
Yes.
Okay, now let's say that you are sleeping. Then someone, let's say, prick your head with, let's say, a nail. You woke up and turned your neck. Now, before you turned your neck, which part of the peripheral nervous system was engaged in the immediate process before you turned your neck?
The motor division, but
the motor division.
The somatic motor division.
Specifically the somatic division. Why?
Because the action of turning the neck.
Yes, because in the action of turning your neck, you had voluntary control in the activity of turning your neck. So it's a somatic motor. Is that okay? All right. But prior to the brain receiving the information, now which part of the peripheral nervous system was engaged to send the information to the brain? Which part of the nervous system was engaged?
Sensory.
The peripheral before, then the sensory, then what next?
The somatic sense.
Yes, the somatic, because if someone is pricking you with a nail, it's the skin, right? So it's somatic. It's the skin. Is that okay? Yes, so that is somatic. All right, excellent. Okay, so let me ask another question. A patient is having a high blood pressure. A patient is having a high blood pressure. Now, information have been sent to the brain. The heart is beating fast and all that. Information have been sent to the brain. Now, the brain is bringing a signal to come and correct the situation. Which part of the peripheral nervous system do you think will be engaged?
The motor nerve division.
Okay.
Specifically, the
Specifically,
visual
the
motor.
visceral motor.
Okay.
And then more
More
specifically, the
specifically, the
parasympathetic
parasympathetic.
to calm the blood pressure.
That is excellent. Now, let me trick my students more. A patient is having slow digestion. Listen, a patient is having slow digestion. Slow digestion. Okay, the digestion is very slow. Now, the information has been sent to the brain. The brain is bringing a response. Which parts of the nervous system will be engaged?
The peripheral nervous system.
That is correct.
Then the motor division.
The motor division.
Specifically, visual motor.
The visceral motor.
Then
Then the sympathetic.
Oh, that is where I got my students. Do you know something interesting in physiology? When it comes to digestion, if you want digestion to be slow, okay, it's the sympathetic that makes digestion slow. That's the more reason why. That's the more reason why we tell you that. That's the more reason why when your body is calm, that is when digestion go on. And that's when an athlete is running, digestion does not go on. When you are running, doing so much activities, digestion don't go on. Is that okay? In the digestive system, sympathetic does not facilitate digestion. Parasympathetic will rather facilitate digestion. Parasympathetic. And that's the more reason why when your body is at rest, you are sleeping and resting. That is when digestive activity rather go on. And it's unique for digestive system alone. I'm not surprised you are not aware of it. It's something that is very technical in physiology. It's unique for digestive system alone. It's unique. So for digestive system, if we want to achieve hyperactivity, it uses parasympathetic. But if we want the activity to be slow, it uses sympathetic. It's unique for digestive system. Okay, so for digestive system, it's unique. If you want activity to increase in digestive system, we use the parasympathetic. But if we want activity to decrease in digestive system, we use sympathetic nerves. So if the brain wants to bring an information for your digestive system activity to increase, it will come through the peripheral, go to the motor, go to the visceral. Under the visceral, it won't go to sympathetic. It will go to parasympathetic. It's unique for digestive system. But for example, if you take the heart, if your heart rate is low, the brain wants to bring an information to increase your heart rate. It will come to the motor to visceral to sympathetic. But when it comes to digestion, when digestion is slow, ideally because it's slow, we are thinking that from the brain to the peripheral to the motor to the visceral, we are expecting that it will come to sympathetic. But for digestion, it's parasympathetic that rather helps with digestion activity or increase activity with the digestive system. It's something that you have to know. They can use it to trick you in physiology. Is that okay? All right. So now that you understand the divisions, I think we can end here for today. Is that okay? All right. So I wish you all the best. We'll meet on Saturday and then Sunday. I'm hoping that within these 2 days, we'll be able to finish with the rest of the nervous system. The slides are already on the platform. You can download them and then listen. And I've sent the workbook for the urinary system to the page. Make sure complete those workbooks and then send them to your class reps. Then they will submit to my office. So all the 4 systems, the 5 systems that we will look at, workbooks are ready for the 5 systems. I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.